afternoon, Adiaga. Adia girls, I would like to welcome you again to our session.
Good afternoon, teacher.
We are going to begin with a prayer quickly and we move on. Whoever is ready, please. I see Cynthia has put her hand up. Cynthia, lead us in prayer quickly. Kelo, you lead us in the closing prayer.
Let us humble ourselves for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for today. We thank you for keeping us alive up to this time. Father, we want to ask you to be with us throughout this history lesson. May we concentrate and may we have no internet disturbances. In Jesus' name, I believed and prayed. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Okay. For today, we are going to look at Calabre Kingdom. Let's not forget that we've been handling some case studies concerning centralized societies in the Interlacustrine region. So we also have another case study, which is none other than the Calabre Kingdom. But before we get there, I'll just remind you of what we did the other week in East Africa, where we were looking at Buganda as a case study. We looked at her origin, her organization, which is way of life, then expansion, and remember the last was on decline. Today's case study is on Calabre Kingdom, and there are things that please you can note down as our discussion will go on to help you follow properly. We would have to look at what comprised of Calabre Kingdom, its location, and then we see its origin. When we look at the kingdom, we would have to also look at how she lived, her way of life, politically, economically, and socially, when time will allow us. So without wasting time, on the screen we have the kingdom, which is Calabre, and we are focused on the origin. On our introduction there, what we have is about the location. That Calabre was one of the Interlacustrine region kingdoms largely inhabited by the Bantu. In your S1, you talked about Bantu migrants, and you saw where they finally settled. So when we have this kingdom, its location is within the Interlacustrine, the Great Lake regions. I hope you remember those, where we have Lake Edward, Lake George, Lake Choga, then Lake Victoria. Down would move downwards into Tanganyika, a part of where we would focus on Lake Tanganyika. So the early Bantu speaking people arrived in this area between that period, which is the 5th and the 6th century. So one group from the south that entered west stayed in the area for about 300 years. Then they migrated northeastwards. So in this slide is mainly location and then the inhabitants. Can we go to the next slide, please? It's a continuation still that the other Bantu in the area. Here we cite some examples where we have the Nyambo. In some books they call them Banyambo, who claim to have descended from the Bantu of Bunyoro. Therefore, they claim that their ancestors came from Bunyoro, introduced the Chwez culture and other tradition claims that the Nyambo always lived in Calabre. Let's not forget that all these kingdoms are coming into play after the breakdown of this once great empire, the Chwezi or the Bunyoro Chitala Empire. So when Bunyoro Chitala Empire broke up, we'll have small states coming up, among which we talked about Buganda. Now we are focusing on Calabre. The next slide. In the next slide, please. After the 12th century, some pastorists from the north also entered the kingdom and transformed it into a powerful state. So by the mid 14th century, Calabre was invaded by the Basita as the dominant class, and their first ruler was none other than Nono. Please take note of the spelling, Nono, capital N-O-N-O, as their great leader. In the 16th century, the kingdom was invaded by the Chwez immigrants under Rohingya from Ankole, and then Rohingya deposed Nono. They became the ruler of the Karagwe and established the Hinda ruling dynasty. And by the mid of the 17th century, Rohingya had transformed Karagwe into a large state or kingdom. Some questions that we state would require you to talk about the personality of Rohingya. And so they would want to ask how the kingdom was organized under his leadership. So in this slide, what must we take note? How does Karagwe come into play? And who are the last descendants or the last immigrants of the Chwez Empire? So please take note. In your S1, I wonder if you looked at the family tree, where in Buganda we have Chintu, then Chinton Nambi, then come down until when we have Chintu marrying Nambi. Then when we look at the other kingdoms, there are still also family trees that we normally focus on. Which family tree, if we would had our books here, would look at it in the history of East Africa, history of East Africa through 1,000 years. I don't have that book now here. When I get it, I'll refer you back there where we have that family tree. The most important thing is that when Rohingya comes in, he deposits Nono, meaning Nono was overthrown and he turned out to be the leader of the Karagwe. But during his reign, he transforms this growing kingdom into a powerful kingdom. Establishment, can we look at the next slide? The establishment of Rohingya's ruler in Karagwe. And here we are looking at how the dynasty came into existence, where its capital was, and how things were run. So after the Luo invasion, I hope now you can reflect back to the breakdown of the Bunyoro Chitara Empire. That after the Luo invasion, when the Luo came, Rohingya led his Chwez immigrants from Bunyoro Chitara to Karagwe. That is southwards. So he deposed the local leader who was there by the name Nono and set up the Hinda dynasty. He established his rule in Karagwe, built his capital at Gwehangwe. He then sent his sons with the royal regalias like spears to establish the Hinda dynasty in all the surrounding areas. What should we take note? That as these people establish themselves, they are interested in expanding. They are interested in raiding weak communities. They are interested in taking over small kingdoms. And that is what he did in the name of creating the Hinda dynasty in the surrounding areas. In our next slide, is a continuation that this gave rise to a small sub-dynasties under his sons. The sub-dynasties are mentioned like Gisaka, Chamtwara, Ihangiro, Buzinza, Busubi, Ureke, and Nasa. These are the ones that were comprising, that eventually made up what came to be known as Karagwe Kingdom. So the creation of several independent Hinda dynasties by Ruhinda sons created rivalry. Each wanted to become a leader. And so this, in a long run, would weaken the Hinda as rulers in Calabre, because it turned out to be survival for the fittest. So these small kingdoms were not directly under the authority of Ruhinda, but when he died, the small states became independent. Here, while we're looking at Buganda, when Buganda was expanding, I'll just take you back to Buganda. When she would attack certain weak societies, sometimes she would leave their leaders to be in leadership, but they would be only answerable to the supreme king, who was none other than the Kabaka of Buganda. So those were known as tributary states, who paid allegiance to the center or to the main administration. So when we are talking about the several dynasties that were created of the Rohingya, that they are those who felt that at one time they should also be independent on their own, not to be under the leadership of Rohingya. What happens when he passes on? Those small created states declare themselves independent, and I hope now you remember those small states that we mentioned up there: Gisaka, Chamtwarara, Ihangiro, among others, who declare themselves independent. And next slide. In the next slide, we are going to look at how the entire kingdom was organized. And don't forget, when the question states, describe the way of life of Kagwe Kingdom, what are the key things that you should have in your introduction before we get to organization? Please take note of what this kingdom was, where it was located, and here you're mentioning the Great Lake regions within the Intercastin regions. Then mention the founders and the Bantu. Don't forget to talk about the Bantu. And as you give that introduction, a brief introduction, don't forget to talk about the personality of Hinda that created the Hinda dynasty. Then you say the kingdom was organized socially, economically, and politically as explained below or as outlined below. Political organization of Karagwe Kingdom. Let's not forget that this was among the centralized kingdoms, and therefore in our list where we have general organization of centralized communities, we are not forgetful to mention that in 1880, Karagwe was ruled by a king. The most important thing here is to take name of the king. And the name of the king, rather the title of the king here, is different from the one of Buganda. Sometimes when we mark students' work, you find somebody talking about Kabaka in Karagwe. There you would have faith. But go ahead and mention that the king, the title was none other than Yomukama. Because this was a centralized society, he had a centralized system of administration. I hope this one isn't new to you. And how we explain it, we are looking at the hierarchy of leadership. From the top was the Omukama, then he would be assisted by the chiefs, and then later there would be the subordinate officials. In the next paragraph, we mention about that the kingdom was grouped into chiefdoms, which is to do with subdivisions. And in the subdivisions here, its main purpose was to ensure effective administration. Don't forget that. Then you go ahead and mention the name of the chiefdom. That each chiefdom was called, is in bracket we have nation or an ihinga. And the chiefs would dismiss a clan head if his people appeared. So what are we taking note? That the subdivisions did exist as far as the entire kingdom was concerned. But subdivisions into what? Into chiefdoms. Why? For effective administration. And therefore, what was the name of each chiefdom? All these that you're mentioning are points for, or they are points on their own, and they're the ones that can earn us more marks. So the chiefs would dismiss, meaning that under that hierarchy of leadership, under chiefs, there were subordinate officials. And the subordinate officials, if you went to the second bullet on political organization, here in this point are the ones that would look at as heads, and they are the ones who would be in case the masses appealed. The appeal here would be made, especially when heads had misbehaved. Misbehaved how? Confiscating people's property, failing to settle disputes, failing to ensure of law and order. So it would be upon the masses to appeal to the chief, and the chief now would take on an action. Can we go to the next slide? I say hand up before I continue. Yes, Paula. Please ask.
Hear me? Hear me? So
I hear you.
So I was wondering, Calabre in Kabaka's area, what's it called? In
No,
Buganda.
Calabre not in Buganda. I said her location is in the intercasting region. And when I mention intercasting region, we are looking at that region comprised of Great Lakes, and here we mention the lakes. But to throw more light on it, you see where Lake Edward and Lake George is, then cross the border of Uganda and Tanzania downwards near Lake Victoria. At the north, or in the north, north of Lake Tanganyika, you looked at the map of East Africa, where we have Burundi and Rwanda, all that used to be Calabre downwards to the border, that is to the west, is it west or east, you would have Lake Victoria. Then on this other side, there would be Rwanda and Burundi downwards. In the south would be Lake Tanganyika. Then you cross the border up to Uganda, that southern part. All that is what made up of Calabre region. So Calabre is not
So
in
it was
Uganda.
in Uganda.
It was both in Uganda and then in the north of Tanzania or Tanganyika.
Okay. Just to clarify, Tanganyika is located in Tanzania. It doesn't cross out to any different places.
Tanganyika was the first name. Then Tanzania is when she attains her independence. So when we are discussing, because these are empires or these are kingdoms that cross over, I'm just telling you its geographical location. Part of it would be in Uganda, part of it would be in northern Tanganyika.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I wonder if you remember your long distance trade, if you looked at long distance trade. If not yet, you'll see we have that central route crossing upwards into the Nyambo through Calabre and into Buganda.
So
you remember that route?
Sending the notes. I wasn't there.
The maps? No, refer back to those maps, because they are maps we normally give when we are teaching trade.
When did you do that? When was that study?
We didn't study trade.
Never studied long distance.
You haven't studied long distance?
We haven't studied long distance.
You must have talked about long distance trade. We'll look at it more in detail. It's a topic we'll have to handle after this, I guess. But I was just wanted to give more clarification about the location of Karagwe Kingdom. But it's
So
not
one
in
more
Ibu.
thing, kindly send the note that you did in S1 from Uganda. I don't want
These notes you already went with them, I remember. These notes
But
of
I wasn't
kingdoms.
there. Can you please send them?
Okay, we'll have them resent.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is there any other person raising a hand up? Yes, Johanna.
Excuse me, teacher.
Mm.
Confused because I thought when they said describe the way of life, you have to just list, okay, not list, but state the social organization. But now you say that the summary would have they were organized socially, politically, and economically. So could you please explain?
When they say way of life,
Yeah.
way of life includes the the three sections we teach. And here, as you describe one is way of life, we would want to see how they administered themselves. That is under political. When it comes to economic, we want to look at their life under how they survived. And the social aspect is to do with how they were interacting within themselves, the environment, and the neighborhood. So if it says way of life, it is in other words asking for political, economic, and social. Yet if the question is specific, that describe the political and economic, please handle political and economic. Don't bring in social. Is it fine?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I still see two hands up. Daphne.
Teacher, when you're answering the way of life, okay, like when you're giving the answers, is it okay like to just give according to what you can remember, or you have to just list these are political, these are economic, and these are social? Like, can you just...
If they say way, okay, if they say way of life, and in your introduction, you say that the Calabre was organized socially, politically, and economically, that will earn you a mark. And then when it comes to explanation, if you start with political, then the next is economic, and the last is social, it will show how organized you are. At a time, we tend to forget and somebody mixes up everything. I wouldn't encourage you to do that. That one can only be done probably when you're caught up with time and you write whichever point you remember. But to be more organized, state them in a very, very organized manner. If you begin with social, you bring in another way of living as political and end with economic. Because these ones now, try to have them on your fingertips, that centralized societies had this politically, had this economically, and had that socially. It will become so easy for you to recall and raise as many points as possible.
Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. Do I still have more hands up? Okay, if there are no more hands, let's continue with the political organization that I stated, where I said I've been mentioning, I'm not forgetful. The first one was about the king, and the title was none other than the Omukama. Then here we look at the hierarchy of administration in the other slide, that where I said there would be at the top the Omukama, then he would be assisted by the chiefs, and lastly would be the subordinate chiefs. In the last bullet is about division of the entire kingdom, or that it was divided into chiefdoms. Then we talk about the role of the chief as far as disciplining the clan heads was concerned, especially if people had appealed. And I've showed you when would people appeal. Can we go to the next slide, Mr. Joe? In this other slide, we look at the clan heads as political figures, as religious figures, and then judicial powers. So the clan heads had political, religious, and judicial powers. And they were supposed to do the following, that they were supposed to head to man clan courts where they would have to settle disputes. So they worked with Muharambwe, who was a religious what? Leader. Traditionally, Africans had that strong attachment with their God, the supreme being, or the supernatural being. But he would have a representative, which representative was believed to be a go-between the people and the supernatural being. So this clan head, much as he had those powers, he would not work alone. He would be working hand in hand with this religious leader. Clan heads were grouped into 8 bigger units of administration, or for easy administration. And those units are just down there for you to get them right. So these mainly, divided people fall, but united people stand. However, let's also take note that if there is easy division, then there is easy administration, as information or communication can move from top to bottom, or it can easily be disseminated to those that are to have it for their own use. In the next slide, the chiefdoms were subdivided into clans, and many clans made up of a chiefdom. Like we talk about, let me just bring it here in our simple terms. The many families here, let's say, let me talk about the Chiwewa family. And my other brother is also in existence. So we would have one family name, like we have our family name as the Musazi. So members, all my brothers and sisters, and looking at the brothers, because clan would normally fall on the side of the males. That's why when it comes to marriage, that people would be happy when a man is marrying, because the clan would be expanded. So the many families here would promote the extension of the clan in existence, and the many clans, like here in Buganda, how it is those 52 that make up Buganda Kingdom. So even here, when we are discussing about Calabre Kingdom, the subdivisions into clans, as many as they are the ones that made up the chiefdom. The clan heads had responsibilities to play, among which were collection of tributes from the people, and then have it pay the chiefs. When such tribute was collected, it was a duty for all the clan heads to encourage people to have it paid for the good of the kingdom. Then the chiefdom was called, that one I mentioned, Ihanga, a nation, and the chief court was to help in dismissing a clan head if he misbehaved, and in case people appealed for his dismissal. Why would he be dismissed? He would be dismissed where now where the court, the clan court, would sit, and that chief who's being accused would be presented for hearing. And where democracy would come in, it would depend on the gravity of what they're accusing him of. And so then decision would be made for his dismissal. In the next slide, the chief was the supreme judge who had the overall power over life and death. The chief granted land according to customary laws. And the customary laws here in Buganda or in Uganda, there's what we call land ownership. And in the land ownership, basically this one is more in communities that are pastoralists. Although here in Buganda, we all know that land belongs to the Kabaka. For the case of customary laws, I'm explaining, it was a tradition, say in Buganda, knowing that all land belongs to the Kabaka, then it means that no one would claim to be in charge of any land, because the only person who would give land and take it away from you was none other than the Kabaka. So when you are given that land, which laws were applying? You who was the tenant was supposed to pay, or he's supposed to pay what we call obusuru, which is more of a tribute. You pay it, you give it annually as a sign of paying allegiance and a sign of appreciation. It is customary. It's a practice that must be handed. Even after using that land, after you are vested, there's a certain percentage that you take to the landlord in appreciation. All that is what we call customary laws. The other one would be if within the region that area is supposed to be used for pastoralism, then they would not expect you to go and do farming there because animals would be grazed in your farms. So there are certain laws that were set that people, if they acquired such land, they were supposed to follow. So the chief here had that role of granting land, and its use was to be based on the customary laws. The chief did not have limited powers, although they had to rule according to traditional practices and principles, meaning there would be checks and balances that they would not finally say, or whatever that was supposed to be said be taken as the gospel truth. In others, they'll turn out to be dictators. So such chiefs were always checked upon based on the traditional practices and principles. What does it call for? How should it be handled? Because the chief would be there to implement. The next, each kingdom developed separately and sometimes had civil wars or foreign evasion. I hope you remember the chiefdoms we talked about by the sons. So what would happen? They could sometimes take away the territories of the weaker and then have them added on to make or to create what came out to be known as the kingdom. Those who were in the neighborhood that were weak, at times they will be taken advantage of and they will be attacked and added on to Calabre. The kingdom never had a standing army, but men among the Nyambo and the young boys belonging to the age sets could be summoned during times of need. And which are the times of need? In situations where they were being invaded or they were being attacked, when we focus on external aggressors. Two, in situations where they should carry out raids, carrying out raids for the good of expanding the kingdom. So the age set, like it is today in Uganda among the UPDF and police, there's a certain age at which one can be recruited into any of the forces, and there's an age where one should be retired. If we looked at the Zulu, if you remember, if you know the Zulu in South Africa, during their days, one under the leadership of Shaka would become or was supposed to give military service to the army until the age of 40. Why such time? Because between the age of, let's say, 16 to 30, one is still energetic, one hasn't got any commitment, and therefore can be loyal in working very hard in protecting the kingdom. So the age sets I'm mentioning or I'm talking about here is when a certain group of people, these are the young, energetic boys, who would be taken to go and help in giving security for the kingdom. So this was very common among the Banyambo community. In the next slide, military training was went on also at the chief's residence, where the young boys would be trained in military skills, discipline, set homes afterwards, and then record back in times of military emergency. I think that one I've just explained it. Their work would only come in when they were highly needed. Among still the political organization of this kingdom, they had royal regalias, and the royal regalias were similar to those of Ankole. Ankole, we are not forgetful of these regalias, like the burning fire, which is the royal burning place, then the royal throne, talk about it. You talk about the royal drums. All these were symbols of unity and power. Like it is in Uganda, if you witness a swearing-in ceremony of His Excellency, he's normally given the constitution, he's given the national flag, the anthem. All these are symbols of what? Power, the coat of arms, and the key, meaning he's in control. So even among the kingdom of Calabre, they had the royal regalias. Please go ahead and give their importance as symbols of unity and power. The next slide, which is economic. Before I look at economic, can I entertain some questions quickly or clarifications that you want before I continue? Are there hands? Okay. If there are no hands, let me continue and look at the economic organization.
Excuse me, teacher.
Okay. Can I have them quickly?
Excuse me, teacher.
Hmm.
Teacher, I have a few questions. The first one is that
Who's
was there
asking?
anything?
Because on my, who's asking? I want to know who's asking.
Lisa.
Lisa, okay, ask quickly.
Yes, was there anything like the king like refusing to step down? Like if they say that the king wasn't good enough and they wanted to dethrone him, was there anything like him refusing? And
no.
Could the people rebel against that?
No, that one never existed, because these people highly respected their kings. It will be very hard for the king to be thrown out. They knew he was next to God, by the way, and he had the absolute powers. So it was very rare. Only this would happen if there were external attacks and there are evasions. That's when we have kings overthrown.
But wasn't there a case like where people could rebel, maybe like people who don't like the king, then they rebel? What would they like do to them?
It was not common. Things have only started worsening today in our communities, probably because more of the social media and name it. But in those days, people respected. They were highly trained to respect their leaders.
Yes.
So it was very hard for people, even when you felt like you don't like, it was very hard, by the way, to come up and stage any riot. The biggest percentage highly loved and respected their traditional leaders.
Okay, and then also, was it a must to join the army, or was it just a personal choice? Like you'd say that I'm going to go and serve the king, or was it a must that every young boy would have to serve in the army?
The master aspect I was referring to was mainly among the Zulu in South Africa. At a given age, between 12, you're giving service to the army up to the age of 40. While here, for the case of Calabre, among the Nyambo, that is when the age sets would come in. Like back home, now you are in S2. So your parents, what they normally do, because S2 is an adolescent age, they will try to put you in one room. Say that is a room for the girls who are in S2, and talk to you as people of S2, not like they will be talking to your last born or your last sibling. So the age sets here. Tradition is more to do with initiation. When such a stage would come, you'd join the age set. And besides, people felt the desire to defend their kingdoms. So at that time, the age sets, they were not mandatory, but you'd find yourself in there, especially if you're an energetic boy and there was need to, it was a must, I would say, if the need would arise.
Okay, and then my last question is that could these boys were these boys ever home trained? They be trained at home like by their fathers or their uncles or elders, or was it
They would be trained. They would be trained as a child is nurtured. But when it comes to military skills, military discipline, all this was done, I said, at the chief's what? Resident. After the training and there is no any need, then they would be sent back home. This one is very common among the Western countries, those ones in Europe. You go train in the army, in the academy, you're there, you give service for a given time, then you're sent away to go and do other things. But in case there is need, like it is here in Uganda, there's what we call a reserve force. They will allow you to go, but you're not leaving for good. If there is any emergency and there is need for reinforcement, you who's in the reserve would be called on immediately to come and join those who are active. That's why they create a reserve force. But for the case of this, I said they would be sent home and they would only be called upon when there was need.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, teacher.
You excuse me.
Teacher, I have two questions. The first one is, if you're writing the essay, does it of how the police do them according to political, social, according to our own choice of order, or there's a specific order?
To be exact, I said, if you mentioned in your introduction that the kingdom was organized socially, economically, and politically, and I'm the one marking, you begin with economic, when in your statement you have social come first, me, I would penalize you for that, because I want you to be orderly and organized. If you can't present them in an organized manner, don't commit yourself that the kingdom was organized orderly, socially, and economically. But we would want to have a unique way of presenting our work so that you're not like people who have been taught in other schools. We want quality work from Gayaza High School. So what happens? If you state political, begin with political. I would advise you that when you're explaining the political, and probably you only remember 5 points, you first write down 5 points, explain them, leave some space. Go talk about economic, and the economic activities are almost the same because these societies are in the intercastrian region. The social organization is similar because there were divisions, there were clan heads, there were initiations, there were belief in gods, belief in small gods. Surely, how do you fail? So just be organized and present your work well organized. If you are committed and you've committed, set it up that political, economic, and social, please, your presentation should follow that order. Have I answered you?
Yes. So my other question is, if the Baganda were doing farming, that means that other tribes can't do farming because farming is only for Baganda, or it was also open for others.
If
Because I mentioned economic activity, that means I'm asking that if we say that Baganda are doing that, the Baganda activity is farming, that means other tribes are allowed to copy their activity, or the economic activity was open to any tribe.
no, farming would only be done based on your location. Why are we emphasizing farming in Buganda? It's just their geographical location. Societies you'd have to look at, they would do farming on a small scale, and their farming was basically for home consumption, not for selling. Things have only changed when times have also changed. It doesn't mean that societies would not do farming, but the scale at which farming was done gives the difference. So they carried out farming, others would keep on animals. It would vary from society to society. So they would also carry on farming, where the difference is in locality and the scale at which it would be carried out. Am I clear? Hello?
Excuse me, teacher. I wanted to ask, this is a different person. I wanted to ask, we didn't talk about the king or whatever, because we kept on saying that the chief was a supreme judge and all that stuff. So did the king not have any rule or any authority or whatever?
I said when you are handling political organization, the second bullet in that slide, we talked about the hierarchy of leadership. The king had his roles to play, but most of the work was being handled by the chiefs and the subordinate officials. So at the top, the king would do the overall. Then he would give the orders to the chiefs, who the chiefs now turned out to be more of active through their subordinate chiefs. And the subordinate chiefs are the ones I mentioned as clan heads. The hierarchy, the structure. So it doesn't mean that the king had have I helped you? Have I answered you?
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask, if they asked for way of living, are we supposed to state the political organization?
I said when we're handling way of living, we look at all the three areas. It's only that now the examiner would want to find out whether you noticed how the societies administered themselves, which is political. You noticed how they survived, which is economic. Then you noticed how they interacted within themselves and the environment around them. So when we are handling the way of life, in others, they're asking you to talk about political, social, and economic administration or organization. Is it still confusing you?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Let me go to economic organization in the remaining minutes, please. While we are handling the economic organization, these are the things that we need to take note. The major economic activity or occupation was farming, carried out by the Nyambo, and longhorned cattle keeping by the Bahima. Please split these points. One should be farming, then the other would be animal keeping. Then tell us who did the farming and then who did the animal keeping. The next activity is ironworking or iron-smithing, where they would make the tools that were used either for farming, either for protection, or at a later time would be used for trade activities. So identify ironworking as another economic activity. Let's go to the next slide. They carried out trade with Bunyoro, Arabs, and other neighbors. How you handle the trade point? Go ahead and tell us what they traded in. Traded in beads, that's when we shall handle long distance trade with the Arabs. Traded in iron coils, traded in Chinese ware. Here we talk about a lot, among which you look at the bangles, you talk about the mirrors, all that. And this was the first on barter trade, the kind of trade they had. And later, cow shows would be introduced by the Arabs. Under the economic organization, is social organization. Is there anything you want me to throw light on economic? One would be farming, two would be animal keeping, three would be ironworking, four would be trade. Please go ahead and look at how these people survived or how they lived as far as survival was concerned. The social organization, which is the last one, under way of life. And we are saying a family formed the basic social unit, like where you come from. Why do we call it a basic social unit? It's where people feel loved and cared for. You say East or West home is always the best. So the family head was responsible for the welfare and all the family. Here we are looking at the families where we come from, that each has a role to play. Dads play their role and mothers also play their roles. Like as children also have our own roles to play. Interclan marriage not allowed, except when the king felt he wanted to marry within a particular one. So in social being, we see how interaction is done, and the best way to promote an interaction is to do with relationship. So marriage was key, only that interclan marriages were never permitted, but exceptional would be the omukama. In the next slide, division of society here in classes, what we call classification. Hinda formed the aristocratic class, which is the ruling class. The Nyambo formed that of the common, and later would be the freed what? Slaves. So Hinda here were the leaders in terms of structure and status. Then look at the Nyambo, who were the commoners, or who at times would be the freed slaves. Their belief did exist, where they had a belief in the supreme being, who was none other than Ruhanga. Ruhanga was the title for the supreme being, and the divine cult of the trees. We know that these people were believed to have supernatural powers. So there was that belief in the god. Age sets were also important, and these were social institutions for blood bonding or brotherhood that were highly promoted. Like you see, I'll look at it in the context of where now we have S2s between a given age, S1s within a given age, and HSCs at a given age. But what makes us all to be of the same age set? We are all students at a given school, and here in particular is none other than Gaza High School. Muharambe settled conflict, but the head of the chiefdom was the final man in everything. I hope you remember who I said about Harambe, huh? Who was the religious leader, helped in settling the conflicts because he was believed to have supernatural power or divine. Here, that will be something else we'll have to handle next time. I only wanted to emphasize the organization, highlight the key points politically, economically, socially, have them on fingertips. If you forget, then go back to the common points we gave for centralized societies. Time is running out, but I would want a few observation before we close, as Akelo prepares to have us in the closing prayer. Are there certain things you'd want me to talk about? Clarity,
Excuse me, teacher.
please.
Vanessa.
Are you
Vanessa.
gone? Have you appeared?
Excuse me, teacher. The economic organization of the Paraguay kingdom. How come the points are few? What if they ask you to explain their?
They are not few.
They are mainly.
They are not few. Please remember those common points we say on centralized societies. Remember the activities we stated, because all these societies are in the Lacustrine region. I expect you to talk about things to do with fishing. I expect you to talk about hunting. I expect you to talk about craft making, pottery, among others. So the points are not few. Here, I'm just giving a few of them because I know we already have these points under the common areas or common characteristics of centralized communities.
Thank you.
Have I answered you? Okay, if there's no more questions, Akelo, lead us in the closing prayer.
Excuse me, teacher.
Yes, please.
Could you please put the chemistry link in the Google Classroom chat? Sorry, could you please put the history link in the chat?
Okay. That one is straightforward to the people in ICT. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
So Akelo, the prayer, if there is no more.
Teacher, I have a question.
Please ask.
Yes, that is it how you say that people were not allowed, interclan marriages weren't allowed? Is it the same as Uganda, how you're not supposed to marry someone from your clan?
That is what I meant. You all belong to the same clan, like I belong to a lion clan, then my wife is also in the lion clan. That would be a big offense. So, like I did, why?
Yes. Because it's not like from the same family, but you're muted.
To marry someone.
Mr. Chwewa, please unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Somebody asked interclan marriages.
Yes,
that you don't marry in the same clan, but you marry from a different clan. Like I belong to a lion clan, I marry from the monkey clan, but not within the lion clan. Why? We need to promote unity with other clans. Then two, there is that.
Teacher, what would happen if you married from the same clan?
It's like marrying your sister.
Culture-wise, it's not acceptable. It's like you're marrying your own sister. And it's a taboo. It would be more a form of sister. Okay. Are we done?
Yes, thank you, teacher.
Okay, can Akelo lead us in the prayer? Is she still around?
Let's humble ourselves for a word of prayer. Lord Father, we want to thank you for today. Thank you for the gift of life. Lord Father, thank you for enabling us to go through this lesson. And Lord Father, even as we continue to learn, may you continue to instill in us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Lord Father, even as we are going to have our lunch, may you bless the hands that have prepared the food. And Lord Father, thank you for our teachers. Thank you that they keep laboring every day to teach us. May you bless them. May you bless the works of their hands. May you continue to multiply their blessings. Lord Father, thank you for your loving kindness upon us. We want to thank you for all this we believed and prayed in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Enjoy yourselves.
Bye.